So age and identity, we all know that all of what we discussing today is comes under the heading of the social construction of identity, or comes under the heading of the significance of identity when it comes to us as an individual, right? Identity, like I keep on saying, is pehchan, and there are multiple factors that we bring in under discussion when we talk about identity. We have spoken about social class playing its role in terms of determining our identity, number one. Number two, we have spoken about how gender has played its role in terms of determining our identity. Number three, we have spoken about how Number three, we have spoken about how ethnicity plays its role in terms of determining your identity. And the fourth factor that we're bringing in over here is age. Okay? The question is, do you think age plays an important role when it comes to defining आपकी पहचान के लिए, आपकी identity के लिए? Do you think age plays an important role? Does it? It does. Age. Does your age help you with getting yourself identified? Let me give you a simple question. If you're not, let me ask a simple question from you all. Are you allowed to vote? How old are you?
70.
Okay. You all are not allowed to vote even if you want to. Right? Do you guys get this? Now, your age is being used over here to help you identify yourself. Age, constructing your identity. Another example. In Pakistan, you retire when you're 60. Again, is it not your age that is determining your status in a society, your economic position in a society, the amount of status and privilege that you get in a society? It is your age, right? So, age playing its role in terms of determining identity. Clear? Now, broadly speaking, when we talk about age, we could put this into different categories. We have childhood. We use childhood to childhood is considered to be an important phase of your life. Number two, we refer to adolescence. And number three, we talk about middle age. Let me see how I can change. Age is considered to be a social construct and not something that is natural. जब हम age की बात करते हैं तो जनाब age is a social construct. The question is, whenever you turn 18, for the ones who have turned 18, you know what? Let's just say, what's the date today? It's the 28th of October, right? Let's just say you turned 18 on the 26th of October, right? You're a bit excited, you're looking forward towards it. You're like, hey, I'm turning 18. And then comes your birthday. You have an amazing day. Your friends throw a party. Your parents pamper you. Deep down inside, you're feeling you've grown up. Do you know what? Later at night, you'd be like, am I not the same person? What is it that changed? If I'm pretty much the way I was. And when you talk about age being a social construct, you never know. What if tomorrow the government decides to allow individuals who are 17 years old to be able to vote? It is a social construct. The society is determining it. Had it been something natural, everyone, just imagine, just think. What possibly do you think would be the change you'd come across overnight? You wouldn't. You would be the way you are. It's your social significance that has changed. That too, once you've turned 18, let's just say it's a marker that the society has come up with. Like I said, in Pakistan, you retire when you're 60. If you talk about Canadians, they are increasing the age at which you retire. If you have a look at the last 2 decades, because Canada के अंदर life expectancy बढ़ती जा रही है, The government now sees that there are more people who are healthy, who can work. I mean, why ask them to come back home and sit and relax and be dependent on state benefits? If they're healthy, if they could economically be put to use, why not? तो जो आप 60 पे रिटायर होते थे उसको slowly and gradually बढ़ाते जा रहे हैं. But then again, life expectancy there is increasing. People live longer. Not only do they live longer, they live healthier lives longer. So the idea that I want you all to get from this is कि age आपका एक biological construct नहीं है. Yes, with age, you experience certain changes. I mean, if you compare an infant with a child, when you're born, you have this wobbly head. देखा छोटा सा बच्चा सर भी नहीं संभाल पा रहा होता. Right? So bones इतने soft होते हैं. And then slowly and gradually as you're aging, there are certain physiological changes that you experience. You're growing up, and then you're growing like this. You are growing. Is it not true? Do you guys get this? Right? So, we are discussing the extent to which age plays its role in terms of determining your identity. The different categories that we're talking about, these categories, they have been put forward by us in this society. And hence we refer to all of these as a social construct, because the society has constructed them. Do we get this? Right? Now, taking it a step ahead, Roberts et al., and this means and others, I'm assuming everyone sitting over here knows this. This means and others. Let me grab another color of pen. There you go. Red. Right? So, Roberts observed that age is an important aspect of identity which is experienced by all regardless of the socioeconomic status, gender, and ethnicity. Now, let me remind you of something. When we talk about age playing its role in terms of determining your identity, it is not only age. Along with age, there are so many other factors too. Like, for instance, let me give you guys an example over here. When we're speaking about your gender determining your identity, it is just not your gender. You're a female, understood. Alongside that, you belong to a particular social class. You come from an ethnic background. You are from a particular age bracket. Things change. Things change. Today you're an adolescent, tomorrow you'll be a young adult, and then from the middle age, old age, if you're lucky. Do we get this? Everyone? Right? So, according to Bradley in 1996 identifies 5 major generational stages of age identity that exist in most modern Western societies. These stages are also relative to particular societies. The movement from one stage to another may be symbolized and celebrated by cultural markers such as rites of passage. Now, we're talking about cultural markers. Remember, I have used the word marker a couple of minutes back. We're talking about cultural markers. We're talking about societal markers. We talk about kids. I mean, I know when kids turn 18, like, oh, we're legal. That's because you now can hold a valid national identity card. I know kids these days get smart cards too. You are allowed to do things that you were not earlier. You can vote. Do we get this? If I use the term cultural markers, this is one term, cultural marker, the other one over here is rites of passage. What is a rite of passage? It is an event, a ceremony that changes your significance, right? That changes your status in the society, right? Do you guys get this? Yeah. Rites of passage, an event that changes your status in a society. Once let me give you guys an example. You're a happy bachelor, and then your parents get your account done, and then you take a file. Status changes, right? When someone dies, they go through their rituals of janaza namaz and burying them, and then from someone who's alive to someone who's, they call it late, right? These are rites of passages. There are different rites of passages that individuals, I mean, there are so many societal differences. There are so many traditional societies that have different rites of passages that individuals are made to go through. There are societies that, I mean, for you to be considered a man, they literally pull out your tooth to see if you can withstand that pain. If you can withstand that pain, they're like, hey, he's a grown up now. Imagine. Likewise, for example, the bar mitzvah is a Jewish coming of age ritual for boys that indicates that they are ready to take part in adult religious activities. Doesn't that happen in Islam as well? There's this age defined that they say, just after namaz padna shuru karni hoti hai, and that is likewise age when you're supposed to fast. That is, I heard whatever. Do we get this? Whenever you fasted first time, kai gharon mein they do, I'm forgetting the name. What do you call it? Rosa Pushe, yeah. They celebrate it, and that's the day when you're dying of hunger. Everyone around is trying to celebrate. You could refer to that as what do you call it? A rite of passage. Right? When you turn 18, they hand over an identity card to you. They expect you to act responsible. You feel a bit more responsible. Right? Isn't that a rite of passage? It is. Do we get this? Do we proceed? Yeah? So, number one, let's start with childhood. Like I said, childhood is, there's, if we talk about different sociological explanations to this, how much time do we have? We have a couple of minutes. Yeah. So, if you have a look at this, the nature of childhood, or rather say the origins of childhood. Let's talk about the origins of childhood. There are different sociological commentators who have very different ideas about what childhood is. We talk about the social construction of childhood, and when we talk about the social construction of childhood, the idea over here is the society has constructed childhood. There was this famous historian with the name Philip Aries. He wrote a book, and the name of his book was Centuries of Childhood. Aries, Centuries of Childhood. Aries, A-R-I-E-S, a historian. Philip Aries, but Aries beginnings are out there. Aries in his book writes, there was no such thing as childhood till the 15th century. According to him, there was no such thing as childhood. Now the thing is, why does he say that? Why does he make it sound like childhood is a recent invention? According to Aries, this entire idea of childhood was not present pre the 15th century. He further claims children were treated like mini adults. They were involved into acts you expect adults to be involved in. They'd be involved into, they do hard work, get involved in violent activities and even sexual activities. The entire idea of childhood, according to him, originated after the 15th century, when religious scholars came up with the idea of childhood being a distinctively different phase of an individual's life. Childhood being a distinctive phase of life where children were considered to be innocent souls who, like a blank slate, who need to be prepared according to the requirements of a particular society. Philip Aries कहते हैं 15th century से पहले तो childhood का कोई concept ही नहीं था. Remember, we discussed all of this under the heading of the social construction of childhood. Let me give you a contemporary example, a real quick one. The childhood you had, if you compare that with the childhood kids are having today, do you see a difference? I've literally seen parents negotiate with the kids when it comes to having a meal. You've seen kids watching Netflix, you've seen kids watching YouTube. There's separate Netflix for kids, there's separate YouTube for kids. Imagine the amount of protection that you're providing to children today. It is a shock to you. Imagine the amount of shock that I've experienced. Of course, if I compare the childhood I had with the childhood my kids are experiencing today, there's a huge difference there. There is a difference. Do we get this? Yeah? So, we're talking about childhood being a social construct. We're talking about the entire idea. A simple question again. Had childhood been a natural phenomenon, don't you think every child in every society would have had the same experiences? Is that so? No, it is not. The childhood experiences you had, child, are different from the childhood experiences Atar has had. You probably got dolls to play with and he did not, I'd like to assume. Your interests were channelized. एक particular dimension में his and another. Imagine you weren't Hanya and you were Henry instead, born somewhere in the UK. Do you think things would have been different? Do we get this? You compare your childhood and the childhood in the rural parts of our country experience, the childhood that they experience. Do you see a difference there? The amount of facilities, the amount of protection that you provide kids over here. Out in rural areas, you see kids going about doing their business, doing things that you don't even expect adults to do here. Do you proceed? After you get this later. Now, in modern industrial societies, in modern industrial societies, childhood is generally regarded as a special, innocent, and vulnerable time in which children's identity should be developed through the interaction with their parents. In addition to parental contribution to a child's identity, parental contribution is there. There's parental contribution, there is the state's contribution, the amount of facilities that your state provides. I know we don't really get to experience a lot of them in Pakistan, but out in the West there are. There's a school bus that picks you, you get to study for free, there are 2 meals you get there. You get a laptop too, free. Do we get this? So, your parents have a contribution, the state has a contribution, the society in large has a contribution. Do we proceed? Now, Wells in 2014 notes that many modern societies also intervene in family life to manage childhood identity. Many modern states, this is what I was talking about, let me just put this over here. This management is almost entirely organized around saving children from internal threats, for example, neglectful or abusive parenthood. Would you agree to this? All right, there are countries out in the West that have started giving this phase of childhood a lot of significance. You get beaten by your parents, you call 911. In Pakistan, you get beaten by your parents, you call your dadi. She's the only lady who can save you, no one else. Do we get this? Now, this management is almost entirely organized around saving children from internal threats and external threats such as germs. So we're talking about internal threats being taken care of, we're talking about external threats being taken care of. Germs and viruses, media representation of violence and adult exploitation. All of this media representation, or we have this viewer discretion. Like I said, there is YouTube for kids, there's Netflix for kids. If you're putting something on the television, there is viewer discretion that is advised there to reduce the possibility of children being exposed to content that they shouldn't be exposed to. Do we get this? We learned it. Okay. In this sense, the state aims to take responsibility for the emotional, physical, and intellectual and spiritual development of the child so that they grow up to be normal, law abiding citizens. So, we're talking about the contribution. Now, remember, you could get a 4-mark question on this. They could ask you about the role that state plays, right? In terms of helping a child develop his or her social identity. Many states have attempted to shape the identity of children by forbidding particular types of behavior which are defined by adults as deviant acts. Now, we all know what the term deviant means over here. Deviant act is an act that is not acceptable in a society. Many societies have, for example, introduced a legal age at which children can officially be regarded as having a criminal identity. In the UK, 10 is the lowest age at which a child can be held to be responsible for a criminal offense, compared with 16 in Azerbaijan and 12 in China. Now, you see these variations over here. Don't you think these variations show us that childhood is a social construct, that age is a social construct, that this entire idea of age is pretty relative? Relative in the sense that if you compare, or if you have a look at cross-cultural comparison, you'd see how the ages that are defined for particular acts to be legally allowed, they vary from society to society. Get it here? An important influence on a child's identity is the fact that they spend many of their formative years in school and college. Many modern states have made education compulsory. You talk about UK, education is compulsory there, right? However, Wells observes that in many less industrialized societies, I want a highlighter. Yeah. So, in many less industrialized societies, many children, especially girls, are denied basic education and consequently grow up lacking numeracy and literacy skills. Now, all of this is being discussed under the heading of your age determining your identity. You very well see that age being one factor, there are other factors that together, it's always a complex interplay. Like I had mentioned earlier, it's not only your age. It's your age, your gender, your ethnicity, your race, your religion, your color, your creed, your socioeconomic status. All of it together helps you determine or define your identity. Clear, dear? Now, Wells also points out that childhood identities in some less industrialized societies may be radically different to that encouraged in richer societies. Now, of course, we've spoken about this earlier. Like I said, if I remember when I had said, if you talk about a comparison between the childhood experiences kids have in our country compared to the childhood experiences kids have out in the West, they're very different. Very young children may find themselves working for very long hours for little reward in extremely hazardous conditions. In some societies, for example, Uganda, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, children have been recruited as young soldiers and been actively involved in the killing of other children and adults. We know this. Out in Afghanistan. Clear here? In Pakistan, I mean, why even blame Afghanistan for this? In Pakistan, haven't you seen these chotus, these young kids working as chotus with mechanics, and they're working in different, they're working at Chai Ke Hotel. Clear here? So, once we have an idea about, and one more thing, when we'd be doing paper 2 family, we discuss childhood, this entire idea of childhood being a social construct in a lot more detail. And you do get a 26-mark question on it. You do, right? Childhood being a social construct. There's a lot of content you have. There's a lot of content. Of course, when you'll be sitting your paper, by then you know that content too. There's a lot that you could pick up from there and put it to use over here. Right? Now, taking it a step ahead, let's talk about the second phase. We're talking about adolescence over here. Adolescence or youth is the period. Now, adolescence is the phase you all are going through. also referred to as teenage. Now have you realized, पहले आपके पास इतनी ज़्यादा categories नहीं होती थी. Today you're an infant, then you're a child, and then you're a teenie, and then you're a teenager, and then you're a young adult, and then you're an adult. And look at the amount of categories that we have today. Had it been something natural, don't you think they would have been there all along? No, they aren't there since forever. It's the consumerist culture. It is this materialistic culture. Advertisers. Look at these brands. There's this literally branded shopping that is done for kids. Go to the M&M store at Times Square in New York, you'd come across a lot of cute little baby rompers is selling them. Look at it. Branding for kids. And the things that they wear, the things that they use, they consume, they're so expensive. And they grow out of it so quick. Get it? Yeah? Number 2, we're talking about adolescence. Adolescence or youth is a period between puberty and the achievement of full adult status. Look at this. You all. Get it? Now, entrance to adulthood in Western societies is usually celebrated on the 18th or the 21st birthday because this is the age at which the state confers legal adulthood via the right to vote, marry, sit on a jury, and so on. There's evidence that before the 1950s, this life stage was not recognized. Now, we're talking about no recognition of this phase till the 1950s. Again, it is something that is now being used to construct your identities. Now, there are different things that are manufactured for you, different music for you to listen to, different sort of books, different movies, different content on the media. Get it here? All of this, don't you think this ends up shaping your identity? If it's not completely shaping your identity, it sure has a significant impact on your identity. Right here? For example, adolescents and their parents in the 1940s frequently shared similar leisure activities. That doesn't really happen anymore. I mean, talk about Pakistan. Whatever happens in the Western world, 20-30 साल के बाद Pakistan में भी हो रहा होता है. Talk about Pakistan. I remember very well sitting and watching television with my family. The entire family used to sit together, watch television. Right? There used to be news at 9 dot. That was our alarm to put us to sleep. Something iPhone does these days. Get it here? Today the leisure activities have changed. If you still don't get this, I mean, 2 days back, and since we have this ICC Men's 2020 World Cup going on, have you seen how, I mean, the other day I was having my child was like, Baba, we want to watch Netflix. I was like, no, this is my time, I want to watch cricket. Children, they weren't ready to sit together. Even if you have children of different ages, they have their own choices when it comes to watching something on YouTube or watching a show on Netflix. Get it here? In modern industrial societies, youth subcultures appeared in the 1950s based on a growing consumer market. Now, this is what I had spoken about, a growing consumer market in the teenage products such as clothes, cosmetics, magazines, hairstyles, and music, which the older generations found pretty threatening. These youth subcultures were often defined as a problem to morality by older generations. And consequently, according to studies by Young and Cohen, they were policed quite harshly by agents of social control. However, global studies of teenagers have found that what young people value is not significantly different to the values held by their parents. Most young people are generally conformist. They respect and get on well with their parents and place a high value on traditional goals such as getting a job, getting married, and setting up a home, which is again more evident in our part of the world as compared to the Western world. If you have a thorough life course analysis, you'd see us in our part of the world, South Asian countries, we have a very predictable pattern of life. We're born, we get studied, we start working, we get engaged, we get married, we have children, and then we die. Out in the West, things aren't as marked, as predictable as they are over here. Clear? Right? In contrast to more industrial societies, many industrial societies do not recognize youth or adolescence as a distinctive life stages. Now, we getting to know about all of this through a cross-cultural comparison. We're talking about a comparison of what happens out in the more developed countries as compared to the less developed countries. As soon as a child reaches puberty, the community of tribe expects them to go through ceremonies or rituals called the rites of passage. This is what we had spoken about a couple of minutes back. After which they take on the status of adults. Girls are initiated into domestic work, skills by older women. Number three, we talk about young adulthood. Number 4, we talk about middle age, and the last one is old age, right? So we are categorizing, or we're putting this, we're dividing age into 5 different sections over here. We started off with childhood, followed by adolescence. Number 3, the third one was young adulthood. The fourth one was, and the fifth one is old age. Do we get this? Now, we're talking about these 5 different categories. Now, before we proceed, a couple of other things that I'd want everyone to keep in mind. The entire idea of to prepare them for marriage, while boys are trained by older men to prepare them for adult roles such as hunters or farmers. For example, in Papua New Guinea and Sepik tribe. Now, what are these? These are, now, see, when you talk about the CIs, remember I keep on saying you get marked through AO1, AO2, and AO3. We all need to understand this real well. AO1 is your knowledge and understanding, AO2 is your interpretation and application, and AO3 is your evaluation and analysis. I'm talking about this part, the application part. How is it that you're able to apply whatever you've studied to real life? These are all real life examples. Clear, dear? Individuals have to go through a rite of passage that involves a painful and bloody skin-cutting ritual which leaves distinctive scars on the face and body, which symbolizes manhood. Look at it. I was giving you a similar example half an hour back, if you remember. Yes, child?
So this is done to teenagers?
Yes, to teenagers. See, this entire idea of teenage, this is a modern industrial phenomena. Out in tribal areas, in less developed parts of the world, I mean, over here we're like, oh, this child is a teenager, you know, they're going through their phase of life, making it sound like something biology has to do with. Get it? Now, taking it ahead, research examples of rites of passage used across the world to initiate adolescence and adulthood. Next, we talk about young adulthood. If we talk about young adulthood generally refers to the period between leaving the parental home and middle age. Leaving your parental home and your middle age, right? When you are getting educated, when you're in your higher educational journey, when you are being career oriented, settling down in life, as usually referred to. Valentine suggests that the private and public cultural markers exist in modern cultures which signify the beginning of adult identity. For example, private markers might include choosing and buying one's own clothes, or going out clubbing for the first time, whereas public markers may, now we're talking about private markers over here and we're comparing it with public markers. Public markers may include moving out of the parental home, getting a job, getting engaged, or getting married. Young adulthood often involves independence from parents and taking responsibility for the first time. For example, paying rent, being faithful to one person, and so on. Do we get this, dear? Does anyone have any question? Taking it ahead, if we move on towards the middle age now. Bradley claims that those who achieve middle age in capitalist societies generally have higher status than the young and adult. Now, why is it that they say they have a higher status? Because that is when you have a lot of energy, you're career oriented, you're focused, you're earning a lot of money, your economic contribution towards your family and the wider society is experiencing its peak. The young and elderly, because the middle age make up the majority of those who constitute the most successful, let me highlight this, the middle age make up the majority of those who constitute the most successful socioeconomic groups. Social indicators of middle age include children leaving home for universities, we're talking about social indicators over here, and more money being available for leisure pursuits. There may also be emotional or psychological indicators as well. So we've spoken about social indicators, and now we're speaking about psychological indicators. That midlife crisis is an example of that. Do you get the difference between social indicators and psychological indicators? Does anyone have any question, beta?
Could you explain these
Come up again.
Could you explain social indicators?
Now when we're talking about social indicators, something that the society apparently sees, like for instance, children leaving home for university, that's a social indicator, right? The society is getting to witness that. However, when you talk about midlife crisis, I'm sure you've heard of life crisis, people experiencing midlife crisis earlier as well. That's a psychological indicator. That's when you feel, that's when you start questioning the things that are happening around you. On one end, you might as well you might refer to it as you experiencing a peak when it comes to your success. Like it earlier says, this is the group that makes up the most successful social economic group of a society. But then at the same time, the void that you experience inside, yaar, paise bhi kama liye, I'm successful, I'm doing good when it comes to my career, but there are so many other questions that you probably have in your head that require an answer to. Get it here? Do I proceed? The last stage that we talk about over here is old age. Now, see, if you talk about all of these ages, if you talk about these 5 different age brackets that we've referred to over here, the most important, the 2 popular ones when it comes to the CIs have been your childhood and your old age, the elderly, right? In many pre-industrial and tribal cultures, the elderly are accorded greater respect. Now, there was a study that was conducted by Cow, Gill and Holmes that was a cross-cultural comparison. They compared elderly from a simple society to elderlies from a developing society to elderlies from a developed society. And what they figured out was the status of elderly, it varied from society to society. If you still don't get this, let me give you a very desi example over here. You know, if I say elderly people are respected more in our part of the world as compared to the elderly people out in the West, would you agree to this? Would you agree to this? The amount of respect we show, because our country is less developed, relatively. The extent to which the knowledge that the elderly have is considered to be more worthy in rural parts of our country if you compare that with the knowledge elderly have over here, because the knowledge they have is actually put to use. The older you are, the more experienced you are. You get to take decisions for your immediate family, the extended family as well. You might as well be the one who's been respected by the entire tribe. You don't really get to see that over here in more developed cities, metropolitan cities. Of course, the more developed a society gets, the status of elderly keeps on changing. The knowledge they have is not seen to be worthy enough, because of course the society is changing. Things that they consider important, the ideas or the values that they hold are slowly and gradually getting obsolete. Get it, dear? In many industrial and tribal cultures, the elderly are accorded great respect and status by the young, and their experience and wisdom is seen as important resource. The same is true of communities in which religion is a prime shaper of morality and family life. For example, failure to look after aged parents is viewed as shameful in Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, and Confucian cultures. Clear here? We all know this. In contrast, in societies which are heavily influenced by Western culture and consumerism, attitudes towards elderly are often indifferent and sometimes even hostile. Survey evidence collected by Orth and Zernuski suggested that consequently many elderly people in modern Western societies subscribe to a negative identity. We're talking about a negative self-identity that they experience. They consider themselves, what did I do? Okay. They considered another, okay, yeah. They consider themselves to be less worthy. One, their economic identity, because of them being forced into retirement, has been put at aside. They're not as worthy economically as they once were. Get it, dear? Characterized by low self-esteem because such societies value youth and those in work but fail to appreciate the experience and knowledge accumulated by the elderly. Walkler et al. Found that this negative self-identity is compounded by the elderly experience of ageism, prejudice and discrimination. Ageism, when you are being treated differently because of the age bracket you belong to. Hand in hand with this goes this idea of infantilization, when the elderly are treated like they're infants. You know how you treat infants? They always need care and protection, and they're always dependent. We do that in the name of respect. Happens so much in our part of the world. Baba ye na kare, Baba wo na kare. The more careful, the more cautious you are, remember you're making that person dependent. And slowly and gradually through this very subtle process of disengagement, they realize that they've been excluded from almost everything that is happening around them. Wouldn't that affect their self-esteem? The economic worth has been crushed already. Senility, you aging, you're done through the prime phase of your life. Health-related issues, your mobility gets affected. You aren't as energetic as you once were. All of this together does affect you, which again varies from society to society. Like I mentioned earlier, life expectancy over here, life expectancy out in the West, it's a lot more than life expectancy over here. People live a more healthy life out in the West. Yeah? Now, the elderly as vulnerable, dependent, inferior, and as a financial and social burden. Let me just highlight all of these. I want to take yellow over here. On the rest of society. Consequently, the elderly are likely to feel marginalized. Now, what does the word marginalized mean? We've spoken about this. Yes, when you push towards a corner, isolated and lonely. Moreover, the elderly are subjected to infantilization. They're assumed to be helpless and dependent on others. They are rarely treated as dependent adults capable of actively making choices and decisions of their own free will. Do we get this here? Everyone? Does anyone have any question? Now, however, if you talk about contemporary society, if we have a look at the postmodernist perspective, they argue that old age is again intersected. Like I had used the term, I'd said it's always a complex interplay. Your social class, your ethnicity, all of it together affects experiences that you're having. A very typical example I keep on giving is of Oprah, the anchor. She's black, she's a female, yet popular, yet successful. Clear? Just because she is successful, that doesn't make every female successful. That doesn't make every member of, black member of an ethnic minority successful. Life expectancy, particularly for affluent is rich, whites in Western societies, is increasing. Consequently, age identities are becoming more flexible and becoming less significant as markers of self-identity. Mike Featherstone and Mike Hepworth in 1991 argue that global media images of aging are becoming less derogatory and condescending towards the elderly. They used to be a lot derogatory earlier. Older people, they were portrayed as the cranky sorts, the more conservative ones. They were used for humor. Just imagine, don't you all go through that? But do you realize that the individuals who own these media organizations, I agree, what's this? Mark Zuckerberg is young, but at the same time, the media magnate Rupert Murdoch, he's 90 plus. He once owned almost 2/3 of the media. Would you want your organizations to portray your age like that? If you're old, you wouldn't. Things are changing. We need to quickly bring this to an end. You all need to leave. In part, this is due to the fact that many global celebrities have become elderly, but their wealth and status have meant that they can project a relatively youthful and dignified image of old age to the world. For example, elderly celebrities such as Sir Mike Jagger, you know him, right? You can Google him. Do not conform to the dominant stereotypes of the age group as vulnerable, dependent, and in constant need of care. This, my dear, brings this age identity wala part to an end. And inshallah, in the next class, we'll speak about globalization, identity, and social change. I have shared this document with everyone. You might as well read through this. I wouldn't hold you here for longer. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll bring this topic to an end totally. Meanwhile, if there is any question, any query, any confusion or ambiguity, feel free to go through this and get back to me. Clear? Allah Hafiz.